Marwyn smiled a ghastly smile, the juice of the soul leaf running red between his teeth. Who do you think killed all the dragons the last time around? Gallant dragon slayers, armed with swords, he spat. The world the citadel is building has no place in it for sorcery, or prophecy, or glass candles, much less for dragons. Ask yourself why Aemon Targaryen was allowed to waste his life upon the wall, when by rights he should have been raised to Archmaester. His blood was why. He could not be trusted. No more than I can. One of the less discussed theories in asoiaf is that the Maesters have a hidden political agenda. The theory is either dismissed altogether as tinfoil or loudly accepted as probably something is going on, but not enough to affect everything too much. The Grand Maester conspiracy is real though. Marwyn, the Archmaester of the Citadel, confirms it as real. And you will be surprised to see just how deep their influence reaches. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, don't forget to like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Maesters are an in-universe guild of scholars, healers, messengers and scientists. Their exact origins are disputed, though it is generally agreed that House Hightower was instrumental in its creation, and to this day they remain their patrons. The citadel where the Maesters are being trained is located in Old Town, where the Hightowers also take residence, and the Hightowers continue to finance the institution. Upon finishing their training, the Maesters are usually sent to serve in the castles of Westerosi lords to help them with various matters. They teach their children, heal them when they're sick, and they advise them in administrative affairs. During wars and conflicts, the Maesters are instrumental to things such as brokering alliances and devising strategies. They send messages and receive them. In principle, the Maesters are supposed to be impartial, and upon beginning their studies, they give up their last name so that their previous identity is unknown. But that gives them an incredible amount of soft power, and they can easily influence the politics while keeping the plausible deniability of neutrality. In A Dance with Dragons, Barbary Dustin sums it up well. As Maester Mandrick went to one knee to whisper in Bolton's ear, Lady Dustin's mouth twisted in distaste. If I were queen, the first thing I would do would be to kill all those grey rats. They scurry everywhere, living on the livings of the lords, chittering to one another, whispering in the ears of their masters. But who are the masters and who are the servants truly? Every great lord has his maester, every lesser lord aspires to one. If you do not have a maester, it is taken to mean that you are of little consequence. The grey rats read and write our letters, even for such lords as cannot read themselves, and who can say for a certainty that they are not twisting the words for their own ends? What good are they, I ask you? They heal, said Theon. It seemed to be expected of him. They heal, yes. I never said they were not subtle. They tend to us when we are sick and injured, or distraught over the illness of a parent or a child. Whenever we are weakest and most vulnerable, they are there. Sometimes they heal us, and we are duly grateful. When they fail, they console us in our grief, and we are grateful for that as well. Out of gratitude, we give them a place beneath our roof, and make them privy to all our shames yet secrets, and a part of every council. And before too long, the ruler has become the ruled. That was how it was with Lord Rickard Stark. Maester Varys was his grey rat's name. And isn't it clever how the Maesters go by only one name, even those who had two when they first arrived at the Citadel? That way we cannot know who they truly are or where they come from. But if you are dogged enough, you can still find out. Before he forged his chain, Maester Varys had been known as Varys Flowers. Flowers heal rivers, snow. We give such names to base-born children to mark them for what they are, but they are always quick to shed them. Varys Flowers had a Hightower girl for a mother, and an Archmaester of the Citadel for a father, it was rumored. The Grey Rats are not as chaste as they would have us believe. Old Town Maesters are the worst of all. Once he forged his chain, his secret father and his friends wasted no time dispatching him to Winterfell to fill Lord Rickard's ears with poisoned words as sweet as honey. The Tully marriage was his notion, never doubted. Here she is conveniently interrupt. Whether one believes Barbara's extremely negative assessment of the Maesters, there is no doubt that most of the things she says are true. The great lords put great trust in their Maesters, and that power can easily be exploited to their advantage. The notion of the Tully marriage for House Stark coming from a hightower bastard and the son of the Archmaester is an interesting one, and is explained well by the theory called Southron Ambitions. For centuries, the North was a reckless kingdom, and House Stark kept their marriages within the North, taking the daughters of their old gods-worshipping bannermen for wives. The betrothal between Catelyn Tully and Brandon Stark was a peculiarity. The Tullys are of firstman descent, yet they are considered southern and they worship the Seven. In fact, the North is hardly unique in their marriage practices. As a rule, the great houses of Westeros rarely marry into other kingdoms, let alone other great houses. It seems to be that the betrothals are usually conducted in between the great lords and their bannermen. Rickard Stark brought the mold, and how? He betrothed his oldest son Brandon to Catelyn Tully from the Riverlands, and his only daughter Lyanna to Robert Baratheon, heir to Storm's End. Thus the great houses were to be united like they have never previously been. This betrothal was additionally accompanied by other marriage proposals. Lysa Tully was to be betrothed to Jaime Lannister. Let's also not forget that Ned was sent as a ward to Jon Arryn, thus adding a potential new ally through means of wardship. So now we have houses Tully, Stark, Lannister, Arryn, Baratheon, all working on the same team. But for what reason? Could it be that these houses planned something big? By that point it was clear that Aerys was mad and unfit to be a king. Most importantly though, he could not be controlled by a guiding hand of his maester, who was a Lannister loyalist anyway, proving that maesters do not always remain neutral. Rhaegar himself likely planned a rebellion against his own father. When this battle's done, I mean to call a council. Changes will be made. I meant to do it long ago, but, well, it does no good to speak of roads not taken. We shall talk when I return. These are the last words Rhaegar ever spoke to Jaime, yet he never returned and never implemented those changes. The Word of Ice and Fire reveals that Pycelle feared a civil war even before the outbreak of the rebellion, observing that the party of the king and the party of the prince was forming at court. Similar to what was happening before the Dance of the Dragons. The infamous tourney at Harrenhal is rumored to have been financed by Rhaegar as a cover-up to meet with all the great lords to dethrone his father. If he allied with the lords united by the Southron Ambitions, then they would be unstoppable, especially since Rhaegar was also allied with Dorne through his wife Elia Martell, and if there indeed existed a party of the prince, then the Dornish would be on Rhaegar's side. Who knows, perhaps if the circumstances had been different, we would not speak of Robert's rebellion, but of Rhaegar's rebellion, where all the people who fought each other would instead be allied against Aerys. In any case, though the plans did not come to fruition, Rhaegar instead ran away with Lyanna, and the rest is history. And the seeds of all this were planted by no other than Maester Wallace, a Hightower bastard. What were his motivations? Well, considering that House Hightower, who is a patron of the Citadel, already once tried to put a firmer grip on House Targaryen, the question answers itself. The seeds of the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war that led to the death of dragons and severe weakening of House Targaryen, were planted even before Rhaenyra and Aegon were born. In fact, those seeds had been planted during the Great Council, where a dangerous precedent had been set. A male claim would come before a female one. Rhaenys Targaryen has been passed over in favor of her cousin, Viserys. Jaehaerys fully bowed to the Andal custom of male primogeniture. Let us not forget that Jaehaerys' hand was none other than Otto Hightower. Fast forward to Viserys' first wife Aemma, dying in childbirth, after numerous complications relating to her fertility. The king was set to remarry, and while the Great Council urged him to choose Laena Velaryon in order to suit the wedge between the two Valyrian houses, he chooses Alicent Hightower, who just so happens to be the daughter of his Hightower hand, himself only a second son. The moment Alicent gave birth to a son, it was a jackpot for the Hightowers, since Viserys' only heir at the time was Rhaenyra, a woman, whose claim could easily be challenged due to the precedent set during the Great Council. A son comes before the daughter. That much has been decided. Viserys Targaryen himself began suffering bad health in his midlife, supposedly due to his weight. Yet at some point a curious situation took place. Yet as he was descending, his grace stumbled and reached out to right himself and sliced his left hand open to the bone on a jagged blade protruding from the throne. Though Grand Maester Melos washed the cut out with boiled wine and bound up the hand with strips of linen soaked in healing ointments, fever soon followed, and many feared the king might die. Only the arrival of Princess Rhaenyra from Dragonstone turned the tide, for with her came her own healer, Maester Gerardus, who acted swiftly to remove 2 fingers from his grace's hand to save his life. Here we see that Melos, who on the basis of being the Grand Maester was clearly loyal to Otto and the Hightowers, was so inept in his job that he almost killed the king, while Gerardus, himself a Maester, was nothing but loyal to Rhaenyra and managed to save the king's life by performing an amputation. Could it be that Melos simply wanted to get rid of Viserys as soon as possible and had plausible deniability as simply not being able to do enough for the king's health? As Maester Crescent says, a man that can heal can also kill. House of the Dragon, while not canon to the story itself and certainly not a true telling of the story, seems to lean very heavily into the complicity Maesters had in the plans. These are both subtle, blink if you miss it moments, as well as some very obvious situations that could only point in this direction. In episode 1, Aemma Arryn is given birth and problems arise during delivery. Viserys and Otto are both present at the tournament, and when the Maester arrives to inform them of the issues, he first reports to Otto, and it's Otto who in turn reports it to Viserys. Viserys arrives at the Queen's chambers, and Melos informs him of the problems. These 2 midwives give each other a somewhat knowing look, and later Melos says that the only way to solve the situation is to perform a C-section on Aemma in hopes of at least saving the child. Viserys agrees on that, Aemma dies, and quickly afterwards her son dies as well. What's also pretty convenient is that Aemma faced numerous pregnancy problems beforehand, suffering from miscarriages and 1 male child dying in the cradle. It's all incredibly convenient. Of course, you could say that this is because Aemma was forced to get pregnant too early or because of the Targaryen inbreeding, but while the first explanation does make some sense as a singular case of Aemma, the other doesn't. The Valyrians were inbreeding for hundreds of years. By now they should be more misshapen than the Habsburgs, yet they aren't because genetics does not work the way it does in our world, and they have magical blood of the dragon. They also never had any problems with pregnancy before, and it just so happens that they begin having these issues when they step foot in Westeros. In episode 2, Corlys and Rhaenys, as well as the small council, urge Viserys to marry Laena Velaryon. Viserys discusses the matter with Melos and Otto, while he undergoes some procedures for the cuts he gets from the throne.
Lord Corlys has overreached, Your Grace. Such matters must be discussed with a small council.
But the wounds made by the Great Council still linger, my king. A match with their daughter would go a long way towards sealing the breach.
Otto immediately undermines Corlys, while Melos points out the advantages of the match, as if to not cast any doubt to his loyalty. Yet at the same time, Otto sends Alicent to spend time with the grieving king, and it is her he chooses as a new wife. In episode 5, Maester Orwyl suggests an alternative way of treating the king's rotting fingers, but Melos insists on leeching the king, even though such treatment proved ineffective.
If I may, Grand Maester, I took the liberty of preparing a fresh set of herbal poultices that might be more effective.
That will not be necessary, Orwyl.
In episode 5, Otto is dismissed as Hand and leaves the castle, but not before telling Alicent that Viserys will die before he lives to be an old man.
Listen to me, daughter. The king will die. It may be months or years, but he'll not live to be an old man.
Episode 8. When Rhaenyra returns to the Red Keep from Dragonstone after several years of absence, Viserys is too sick to attend to his duties, and it's the Hand and the Queen who rule in his place. When Daemon and Rhaenyra visit him, they find a cup of milk of the poppy. They later confront Alicent about his state, and Rhaenyra laughs knowingly when she learns that it was the Maesters who advised Viserys to drink it, later directly accusing Alicent of giving it to him so that he is too drugged to perform his duties.
Pain on the advice of the Maesters.
Oh, the Maesters. Of course. It is they who keep him addled on milk of the poppy while the hightowers warm his throne.
Rhaenyra, if you would see him without it, almost blind with suffering.
No.
Alicent has already excused that it's simply there to prevent the pain that they themselves are the source of. Daemon also makes an observation about hightowers replacing Targaryen decorations with their own, a symbol of them overtaking the castle.
For the king's suffering, did the maesters also prescribe the removal of Targaryen heraldry and the installation in its stead of various statues and stars?
It is not a stretch to assume that, at least in the show, the hightowers, with the help of the maesters, wanted to stage a takeover. In any case, a bloody civil war follows, in which most of the dragons perish. The last dragon dies during Aegon III's reign, small and misshapen. Curiously, the dragons born in Westeros never grow to be as big as Vhagar, Balerion or Meraxes, with the maesters attributing it to their closure in the Dragon Keep. Many blame Aegon for the death of the last dragon, because trauma left him with a fierce hatred of these creatures and earned him the nickname the Dragonbane. Rumors are that he ordered the dragons to be poisoned. Yet that is also contradicted when we learn that Aegon made efforts to hatch dragons in spite of his negative feelings towards them, since he knew that dragons would help him keep the realm stable. Someone was poisoning the dragons though, and who would be better equipped for that than the guild of scientists who are also trained in poisons? Maybe the dragons growing smaller was not the fault of the Dragon Keep either. We reach the most tinfoil aspect of the conspiracy, namely the examination whether it is possible that the tragedy in Summerhall could have been orchestrated by the maesters. We know very little of what happened in the Targaryen summer retreat. Aegon V wanted to bring dragons back, but something went terribly wrong, and the castle was devoured by flames, with most of the attendees dying. The only thing we know about the tragedy was a letter written by a maester, with the ink conveniently spilled to hide the most crucial information. The blood of the dragon gathered in one. 7 eggs to honor the 7 gods, though the king's own septon had warned. Pyromancies. Wildfire. Flames grew out of control, towering, burned so hot that. Died, but for the valor of the Lord Command. After the maesters worked so tirelessly to get rid of the dragons, they could not allow for Egg to succeed in waking dragons out of stone. Egg himself had dragon dreams, just like Daenerys. Could it be that he also figured out the recipe to bring them back, but the maesters did something to prevent him from succeeding? Not only that, but it just so happens that Egg took everyone to Summerhall with him, with many Targaryens perishing in the tragedy. If it was the maesters who planted this idea in his mind, then not only did they prevent the dragons from being reborn, they also got rid of a significant portion of the dynasty that they worked for centuries to get rid of. Summerhall is also the moment Rhaegar was born, after Rhaenyra suffered from numerous pregnancy problems, very similar to the ones Aemma had. This is when Aerys' paranoia set in, and upon the birth of Viserys he told the Kingsguard to watch over the babe. Even Rhaenyra was forbidden to be alone with her son. Aerys insisted that his food taster suckle at the breast of the wet nurse to be certain that there was no poison on her nipples. Ridiculous, stupid, and yet Viserys turns out okay, and grows into adulthood, just like Rhaegar. Coincidence? I think not. And here we return to Maester Wallace, who kickstarted Rickard Stark's Southron Ambitions, and with them a civil war that finally ended the Targaryen dynasty they worked so hard to overthrow ever since they set foot in Westeros. Getting rid of Aerys was at the very least the first step in the right direction, since Rhaegar would be easier to influence rather than a contrarian, paranoia-driven Aerys. And from Rhaegar, next steps could be taken to get rid of the Targaryens once and for all. Yet unfortunately, Rhaegar made things easier for the Grey Rats by running away with Lyanna. The Maesters are anti-magic and anti-dragons, that much is established by Marwyn, so they could not stand the idea of magical dragon-riding people ruling their kingdom. Over the course of centuries, they have worked tirelessly to undermine their rule, with the guaranteed support of hightowers. Marwyn's claim of killing dragons can be understood both literally, as in killing all the magical creatures called dragons, and metaphorically, killing House Targaryen, the metaphorical dragons, by setting them against each other, luring them into Summerhall and finally orchestrating the rebellion. The Grand Maester conspiracy is real and confirmed by Marwyn, who, as an Archmaester, knows the inner working of the guild. Marwyn is a much different Maester than the rest, since he is actively interested in magic and is not afraid of seeking it in strange places. He confirms it, and we can retroactively search for clues to confirm it. Barry Dustin is right. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe and share. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video.